Hello, Nathan. Welcome back. It's good to see you.
Same here, of course.
How are you then?
Good. Just another 10 days until the stay-at-home order is over.
All right. Okay.
You know, unless it's extended, but
still a long way here.
Yeah. How about you? I mean, do they have a?
I'm fine. The situation here is a bit critical, but I'm still pondering whether it makes sense for me to go back to see my mother in Venice, but and friends. But I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if I would be severely quarantined there, in which case it doesn't really make sense. And
Right. You very well could be.
I have to find out in the next days. But here I'm personally I'm okay. I mean the country is in difficulty, but fortunately for me I'm okay.
Good.
So last time you left us with this enigmatic claim. You said that we must think that the nature of time is timeless. Could you expand on that?
No.
No way.
Because it's so enigmatic. I don't know if I can explain.
Otherwise, it would cease being enigmatic.
but I will eventually. But I want to preface it with some things to sort of help in the explanation of it. Mm-hmm. I want to begin by a claim that I made last time, that I've made a couple of times already, and that is that if you start with some version of the A theory, and the A theory is a theory that's based on the idea that events are intrinsically past, present, and future. And there are different versions of the A theory depending upon whether or not you believe that past, present, and future exist, or just the past and the present, or just the present. But all of these views, if they're just taken as holding that there is an A series, do not, the time is just an A series, do not explain passage. Because the A series, a single A series as such, is static. There's no passage to it. One event or many events are past, one's present, and so on. So that something more has to be added to give you passage, to explain the passage of time. Now, I'm just going to be talking initially, at any rate, about the full future theory, because it's the one McTaggart attacks, and it's a standard version of it. And I believe the arguments that apply to it also apply to the other versions. And in fact, through my long career, I've argued against many different versions of the A theory. And so, but what more is needed? So let's just deal initially with the full future theory. Past, present, future exist. What more is needed to give you passage is temporal becoming. And temporal becoming is the idea that each of the terms in the A series change or pass by changing their A properties. So temporal becoming is an event having the property of being future, taking on the property of presentness, and then taking on the property of pastness. That's what temporal becoming is. But temporal becoming, so understood, is a contradiction, because temporal becoming in itself would imply that as an event passes through time, it has each of these incompatible properties. And by saying they're incompatible, I mean that if an event is future, it's not present or past. If it's present, then it's not future or past. And if it's past, then it's not present or future. But temporal becoming is an event having each of those properties, which is not possible. Now, of course, there is a obvious solution to this. Okay, so you might say this is McTaggart's paradox. That's McTaggart's paradox, that every event must be past, present, or future, but it can't be all of them, but it must be all of them in order for time to pass. And therefore, the idea of attributing past, present, and future to objects is contradiction. Now, the response to that is that it's true that temporal becoming requires passage, but passage does not involve a contradiction, because once you introduce time in some form or other, then the event no longer has incompatible properties, because it's not a contradiction to say that my birth was future at one time, it was present at a different time, and it was past at still a different time. There's no problem there. But you see what's happening. You're going from a time is involving the A series to time is involving temporal becoming, because you need temporal becoming for passage, which on the face of it is contradictory to the response. No, it's not contradictory, because it has it at different times. But then you're back to time. And if you're back to time, then we're still stuck with the idea of what is it for time to pass. So that is the problem. Now, if you say that for these times to pass is for the times to line up in a series, so the times T1, T2, T3 pass in virtue of having T1 is present and T2 is future and T0 is past, then you don't have time, because you just have now you have these moments that are statically past, present, future. So and then, well, you could introduce temporal becoming of the times, but you could see, and this was McTaggart's point, that you have a vicious infinite regress, because you don't have time with the A properties, you have a contradiction with the temporal becoming, you avoid the contradiction with introducing time, but then you don't have passage, because the times don't pass without A properties, and A properties is enough. So you're just going in an endless circle. Now, one might say that the problem with understanding time in terms of the A series plus temporal becoming is that to understand passage, things must pass in time. So it's an analysis of the passage of time that requires time. That for an event to pass, it must change in time, and so you have the problem again. So now the view of time that I wish to defend is that you could have passage without the ground or the basis of something passing being in time. That you don't, in order, I call this the R theory after Bertrand Russell, because in his 1915 paper, his famous 1915 paper on the experience of time, he defended a view that I have adopted and modified in a way, or said things about it that would respond to objections that have been made to the B theory. Now, it's interesting that the B theory, I mean, so for most of my life, I have been a B theorist. Now, I don't necessarily, I mean, there are some differences, but in terms of what I wrote as if I was an R theorist. And actually, my first book, the title of it was Temporal Relations and Temporal Becoming, a defense of the R theory of time. But I will admit that a defense of the Russellian theory of time. But I was thinking at that time that either you held that there were temporal relations or you held that there was temporal becoming, because I identified temporal becoming with how I've defined it, And since at the time when I wrote the book until this day, I don't believe in A properties or temporal becoming as the donning and doffing of A properties. That was my thinking has changed about that. Now, as I will argue eventually, I believe that you can have temporal becoming, you can have passage with that, real, full-blown passage. In fact, the only passage that there is, without A properties and just with, I won't call them B relations, I'll call them R relations. That relations themselves could be the ground of temporal passage. And, I'll explain what that is. But because I came to see that the passage of time is grounded in our experience of succession, and the experience that's what the passage of time is. Because like I was thinking that for time passes, the expression time passes suggests that passing is something that time does, as opposed to passage being something that time is. As passage as being the essence of time, not something that happens to time. And so that in saying that temporal relations are the ground of passage, or succession is the ground of passage, that temporal relations are passage. That's what the passage of time consists in. The passage of time isn't something happens to temporal relations or to anything with that. So McTaggart attacked Russell. An interesting story. Ingtherson told me about this. You know, have you noticed that Russell never talked about McTaggart? I mean, they were colleagues at Cambridge.
That's true.
They,
That's true.
they were colleagues at Cambridge, you know, and so he must have been aware of his argument against reality attack. And the reason why was because, you know, Russell was a pacifist and he went to prison in World War One because, you know, of his views about the war. And McTaggart was for the war. So he didn't like McTaggart. And so he didn't even want to, you know, go near
I
him.
didn't know. Was he a conservative, McTaggart?
I guess, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. This is a story that Valdi Ingtherson told me.
Okay.
But McTaggart, he didn't really talk about Russell in his 1908 piece because Russell didn't publish on the experience of time until 1915. But in the 1927 piece, oh, by the way, I might add, this is a digression, if I may. In 2007, I went to Cambridge to do some research on Broad at the Boolean Library in Cambridge. Hugh Miller helped me get there. In fact, Hugh Miller helped me get I was a fellow at Cambridge, 2001, visiting professor. You know, he helped me with that. Hugh Miller, you know, it's interesting how there are certain philosophers that have been very important to me, and Hugh Miller is certainly one of them. But at any rate, so I was at Cambridge, and in the Boolean Library, you can't get a book. Okay, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. You know, you can't look at a book.
So, well, can you do that?
You could not much.
You can
Not
take
much.
your own books and read them.
Not even that. What you could do, which is what I did, you know, if you get somebody to sponsor you, like you, Mellor, you could go to the front of the library where the librarian's sitting with fetchers and tell them what you'd like to get, and they'll fetch it for you. I mean, Linda, who's a librarian, you know, went into an aisle once to look at a book and she got shooed out of there. No looking. So, yeah, I mean, it didn't matter. I was there to get Broad stuff. And, but, okay, this is where I want to get. You know that Broad was the editor for McTaggart's second volume, second book of The Nature of Existence, because he died somewhat suddenly in 1925, I think it was, and came out in 27. But McTaggart hand wrote all of his, all of the book, and he had three drafts. So I was able to look at each of those drafts of The Nature of Existence.
Oh, wow.
And there weren't too many scratches, cross-offs either, you know. Not many at all. You know, he just sat down there, and I don't know what he did on the second and third, how it changed, but they were complete. But that was kind of exciting, seeing the original handwritten. So at any rate, however, back to the content of the book, the as opposed to the form. he says that he's discussing Russell. You know, there are some philosophers who hold that the B series constitute all of time, but I don't think they're right. And then he goes about to give that argument against the B series, but it's demonstrable that he understands the B series in a way that is not the way Russell understood it. And you know, because he analyzes the B series in the first instance in terms of the C series plus the A properties. So if you take away the A properties and you think that's the B series left, of course you're going to get you're going to get a view that's open to the objections that it's not time. You've taken away time without the A series. But that obviously massively begs the question. But that's not exactly what I want to talk about. Now the B series, how should it be understood, or how do the B theorists understand the B series, and what is the difference between the B series that the way in which McTaggart understands it, the B series, the way in which B theorists understand it, and the R series, the way Russell and I understand it. I mean, that needs to be spelled out to see, in the first instance, why McTaggart's critique of Russell is an attack on a straw man, because he's not really critiquing Russell's view of the B series. So I mean, there's one thing that I think should be said, that McTaggart says that at the beginning, prima facie, time consists of an A series and a B series. The A series is the events that are past, present, future, and the B series events that are earlier and later. And that, okay, there's no, we could agree with that. Let's say that prima facie, commonsensically, this is how we talk. We could talk in some sense experience time like that. But it leaves open the question of what is the ontological nature, what category do the entities that ground the phenomenological facts belong to. I mean, presumably he's not presupposing any issue when he says prima facie.
Yeah.
And so that to say, Russell could hold the B series without being a B theorist, he just has a different interpretation of the B series. All right, well, so what then is the difference between how Russell or how the R theorist conceives of the B series, which we would call the R series, and B theorists and McTaggart? And which view is, which interpretation of the B series is correct? Now, both of those questions are very important, because they have implications for a battle that has been fought since the time of Plato. And so before turning to the questions about how you distinguish the different views and which view is correct, I wanted to talk about the battle that is at stake in the issue of which view is correct. All right, so in the introduction to his book entitled The Existence of the World, the prologue, I should say, to the book entitled The Existence of the World, an introduction to to ontology, an introduction to ontology, Reinhard Grossman, who's also a Bergman student, and Reinhard, yeah, I liked Reinhard. I mean, I gained. Well, I had correspondence with Reinhard. He's passed now, but he was a very good philosopher, I think. At any rate, I'm going to quote a passage from, this is in the prologue of the book, The Existence of the World, An Introduction to Ontology, published by Routledge in 1992. Very good. I mean, I taught this in internal metaphysics once, and I don't know if it was a great idea, but I enjoyed it. Yeah. Okay, so this is the passage. Socrates, what we shall see is something like a battle of gods and giants going on between them over their quarrel about reality. Theaetetus, how so? Socrates, one party is trying to drag everything down to earth, out of heavens and the unseen, literally grasping rocks and trees in their hands, for they lay hold upon every stock and stone and strenuously affirm the real existence. That real existence belongs only to that which can be handled and offers resistance to the touch. They define reality as the same thing as body, and as soon as one of the opposite party asserts that anything without a body is real, they are utterly contemptuous and will not listen to another word. We know who they are, don't we? Theaetetus, the people you describe are certainly a formidable crew. I have met quite a number of them before now. Socrates, yes. And accordingly, their adversaries are very wary in defending their position, somewhere in the heights of the unseen, maintaining with all their force that true reality consists in certain intelligible and bodiless forms. In the clash of argument, they shatter and pulverize those bodies which their opponents wield. And what those others allege to be true reality, they call not real being, but a sort of moving process of becoming. On this issue, an interminable battle is always going on between the two camps. That's the Sophist, Plato Sophist. Okay. So the battle between the giants and the gods is a battle of those who believe, like Plato, that the world can be divided into two realms. In one realm, there are the changing things, like apples, flowers, people, the realm of individual things that exist in space and time. In the other realm, there are unchanging things, the property of equality or beauty, and these are atemporal things that do not exist in time. The giants are naturalists who believe that the universe is the realm of concrete things, for the universe is a spatio-temporal entity. And not only is the universe a spatio-temporal entity, but all the parts of the universe or the concrete things that exist in the universe are spatio-temporal things. They claim that there is nothing but the universe. The gods are ontologists who believe that the world is greater than the universe. For in addition to spatio-temporal things, there are abstract objects, atemporal, non-spatial things that are unchanging. And of course, the spatio-temporal world is changing. And in that realm of unchanging, atemporal things, there exist properties and relations, including temporal relations. Even though Plato didn't believe in relations, he tried to analyze relations away, but we believe in relations, and they are not spatio-temporal entities. Okay, so I want to argue that one must recognize, to give a proper account of time and temporal passage, one must recognize that the world is greater than the universe. For the spatio-temporal world is not sufficient to understand the passage of time. For the passage of time exists, but it does not exist in space and time. Then, so the argument about the nature of time has larger ramifications than simply the argument between the A theory and the B theory. Because if time is part of the world over and above the universe, then you have an argument for the existence of the world over and above the universe. That's a reason to believe that reality is greater than the spatio-temporal universe, which is, a big issue. And so structuring the issue in that way, does the passage of time require that the world exists in addition to the universe? That's, so I mean, that kind of,
Very interesting question. Yeah.
so that's kind of, and then McTaggart. Okay, I'm going to bring in. I'm going to go back to McTaggart because I'm going to go back to McTaggart in the first instance because there is reason to believe that there's textual evidence to believe that McTaggart was sympathetic with Russell's analysis of temporal relations. Okay, somehow he gets, he gets fucked up when he analyzes temporal relations in his 1908 paper.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the C series with the A series superimposed on it, and also in the article on time in 1927, when he construes the B theory as permanent, because by permanent there he clearly means sempiternal, always existing. If it ever is the case, then it's always the case. And he uses that language repeatedly, which that means the B series is eternal in the sense of everlasting. And that, of course, is a gross misinterpretation of the R series. But, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. What I want to emphasize is that McTaggart was well aware of Russell's correct view, and of course you more or less make this point in the. I mean, you don't in the paper that you wrote, that I liked. We talked about succession is needed. What was the name of that again? That was
if it ain't moving.
no, the one in analysis. I think it was in analysis.
That's the delusive.
The
illusion of passage. Yeah.
Illusion of passage. Yeah, I mean, you make the point that that passage requires succession,
Yeah. I completely agree with you on that.
And that what I think McTaggart also does is he recognizes that point. He recognizes that point, but he goes astray because in an obscure page in the second book that's like 200 pages after the chapter on time, he gives a definition, an analysis, a reduction of earlier than in terms of if it's past and present,
Yeah, I remember you quoting this in your book, Becoming. What was it called? This book?
Oh yeah, temporal relations and
temporal relations and
and so that's why there's a paradox. I mean, that's why he gets time is unreal, because he's committed to analyzing temporal relations, and then once you do that, you're screwed, because temporal becoming is in terms of temporal relations, and then temporal relations are in terms of temporal properties, and temporal properties require temporal becoming. You're off on a wild goose chase. Whatever that is. I mean, that's an old expression. I mean, they don't have that expression in Italy, do they?
No, not as far as I know. No.
Oh no, that's an American expression, but it fits. Can you imagine running after wild geese?
Yeah.
It would be a hopeless endeavor. Yeah, I mean, where would you go? I'll tell you one thing though. I'll give you a story. This is so funny. So when I was at Iowa, an undergraduate, I had a friend. Okay, this friend of mine and me, we wanted to get high, preferably on pot. But so we went out, but there wasn't any pot to be had. So we heard that there was some kind of seeds. I forget what kind of seeds it was. That if you ate the seeds, you could get high. Whatever it was, we went out looking for it in the Iowa cornfields and so on, and we came across a farm of turkeys.
All right. Okay.
Thanksgiving in Iowa is farm country. The turkey, hundreds of turkeys, and so just for a joke, I yelled out, "Gobble gobble!" Right?
And they
started yelling at me.
And they all. I know. I heard that. I saw that in the video. It's quite impressive.
Oh really?
What they do? Yeah, they look like a huge crowd.
Oh yeah!
I mean, it was. I remember it from 50 something years ago.